The storm rolled over Camp Pendleton with the subtlety of a freight train. Dark waves of clouds crushed the sky, and the kind of cold Californian rain that felt almost personal, sharp, needling, relentless poured onto the parade ground. Recruits ran drills through mud, boots slapping like gunfire, cadence echoing through the soaked air. 1, 2, 3, 4. Harper Lane stepped into that world like she'd been dropped there by mistake. A small figure wrapped in a slate-gray hoodie and damp running pants, moving through the storm the way someone moves through a grocery aisle, calm, certain, unhurried. Her sneakers squished with every step. A plastic clipboard hung at her side, but she didn't check it. She didn't look around, didn't admire the base, didn't cringe at the thunder shaking the rooftop of the armory. She simply walked. To the Marines, she was a glitch in the landscape. A random civilian ghosting across a battlefield. "Who is that?" a corporal muttered from the pull-up bars. "Probably one of those desk contractors," his friend replied. "You know, the ones who write reports about how we should share our feelings." Laughter cracked through the rain. Another Marine, broad-shouldered, buzz-cut board, shook his head. "Nah, bro, look at her shoes. Those are target clearance sneakers. She's definitely HR." The group snorted, impressed with their own humor. Harper didn't react. She moved like she was insulated from the human world, as if she were watching events from behind an invisible screen. Her hood shielded her eyes, but her posture, upright, precise, carried an authority that contradicted everything about her appearance. She was wrong. Out of place. Too calm. Too deliberate. And nothing irritated a group of Marines more than a quiet, unbothered stranger on their turf. When she cut across the training field and disappeared into the fog near the obstacle course, the group exchanged looks that needed no explanation. Let's mess with her. Not to harm. Not to bully. Just the bored, stupid, restless kind of fun that happens when young men feel invincible. They jogged after her, boots pounding the wet gravel. Rain slapped their faces as they reached the rope climb, where Harper stood inspecting one of the frayed cords. She didn't turn when the first Marine called out, "Hey, hood girl." No response. Another Marine stepped closer, smirking. "You realize this is a restricted area." Harper continued studying the rope, fingers brushing the fibers. "Hey," he repeated, tapping her shoulder. Slowly, very slowly, she turned her head. Her eyes were shockingly steady, not annoyed, not frightened, not even irritated, just steady, cool, clinical, like she was taking inventory of the room and calculating something the Marines couldn't begin to guess. It threw them off just enough to make one of them chuckle awkwardly. "Relax," the squad leader said, grinning. "We're just messing around, you new here." She didn't answer. A Marine stepped closer, circling behind her. Another blocked her left. They weren't threatening yet, but they were definitely surrounding her. "Yo, what's with the attitude?" one asked, leaning in. "Least you can do is say hi." He reached forward and flicked the edge of her hood. The movement was small, harmless, a nothing gesture. And yet, Harper stepped back with a quiet, controlled precision that made the men blink. Not scared. Not startled. More like, "Don't touch me unless you want to regret it." Her silence unsettled them. Marines were used to noise, talk, laughter, yelling, commands. Silence felt like a trap. One Marine tried to salvage the moment. "Hey, calm down. We're just playing, okay?" Harper tilted her head slightly. A single raindrop slid off her hood and hit the ground with a decisive tap. Her voice, when she finally spoke, barely rose above the rain. "I'm fine." The simple sentence hit harder than expected. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't timid. It sounded like a verdict. Before the Marines could figure out why her tone bothered them, a deep voice cut through the storm. Stepped away from her. Gunnery Sergeant Porter didn't yell. He didn't have to. His voice carried a weight only Marines understood, the weight of a man who had seen war from the front row and came back with no patience for games. The group snapped to attention instinctively, spinning to face him. Porter stood there like a statue carved from cold stone, rain dripping off the brim of his cover. He stared at the 5 Marines with a look that suggested he was 2 seconds away from rewriting their futures. "Gunny," the squad leader began, "we were just—" "Shut your mouth." The Marines closed it. Porter stepped forward until he was just behind Harper, but he didn't look at her. His eyes locked on the squad like rifle sights. Then he said it. The sentence that felt like a grenade dropped at their feet. "Step back from her, that's Spectre." The Marines froze. "Spectre." The code name hit like a slap. Even if most had never met her, they had heard stories. The kind whispered after lights out, the kind recounted by men who had seen something they couldn't explain. Some said Spectre was a military myth. Others swore she was an off-the-books intelligence operative who could disappear into thin air. A few claimed she'd stopped a convoy ambush in Afghanistan using nothing but misdirection and a broken radio. And at least one Marine insisted he saw her disable 3 armed insurgents without making a sound. But nobody ever had proof. Nobody ever saw her face. The rumors always ended with the same phrase. "If Spectre wants to be invisible, you'll never know she was there." And now she was standing in front of them. Soaked. Small. Wearing discount sneakers. A monster hidden in plain sight. The Marines slowly stepped backward, faces pale, hearts thudding so hard they felt it behind their eyes. Porter finally looked at Harper. His jaw tightened with something resembling respect and just a hint of fear. "You should have told us you were arriving today," he said softly. Harper blinked once. "I didn't come here to be announced." The squad swallowed hard. She shifted her weight, studying the Marines who had encircled her, not angry, not vengeful, more like she was analyzing them the way one might analyze weak points in a wall. Then she said it. The sentence that made the squad's guts twist into knots. "If you encircle someone—" She paused, letting the silence coil around them. "Finish the job. Sloppy form gets people killed." None of them breathed. She wasn't threatening them. She was teaching them. And somehow, that was far more terrifying. Porter's voice sliced the tension. "All of you fall in at the hangar, now." The Marines didn't run. They fled. Harper turned back to the rope climb, examining it again as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just turned 5 Marines into frightened recruits on their first day. Porter watched her for a long moment. Then he whispered under his breath, barely audible over the storm. "God help this unit." Because Spectre was here now. And nothing would be the same. The rain hadn't let up. If anything, it had grown heavier, pounding against the metal roofs of the barracks and slicking the asphalt into a hazardous sheen. Camp Pendleton was alive with the rhythmic chaos of boots on mud, shouted orders, and the clanging of obstacle course equipment. But for the Marines in the hangar, all that noise might as well have been a distant storm. Their focus was singular: Harper Lane, Spectre. By now, every man who had encircled her earlier knew the name and felt the chill it carried. Their bravado had evaporated like morning mist. Faces pale, fingers twitching toward weapons they weren't supposed to draw, they whispered behind closed hands. "She's real," one muttered. "I thought she was just some urban legend," another said, voice shaking. Gunnery Sergeant Porter leaned against the wall, arms crossed, scanning the room like a hawk. His eyes never left Harper. Something about her unsettled him too, not fear, not admiration, but that deep, gut-level awareness that this woman was dangerous, and not like any danger he'd faced before. Spectre didn't need to speak to command attention. She walked slowly, deliberately around the training floor. The mud clung to her sneakers, her hoodie plastered against her shoulders, yet her posture remained flawless, rigid, controlled, disciplined. She carried no weapons, no gadgets, no entourage. Only the quiet certainty of someone who had never lost a fight and never intended to. A young Marine, barely out of boot camp, stepped forward. Ma'am, do you need help with?" He gestured vaguely at the obstacle course. Harper's eyes, sharp as broken glass, locked onto him. For a heartbeat, it felt like the storm had stopped. All the noise, the rain, the shouting, it vanished. "I don't need your help," she said softly, but with a weight that made the man stumble back a step. Then she did something unexpected. She climbed the rope. It was slow, deliberate, like a dancer moving through invisible currents. Each movement precise, controlled, economical, no wasted effort. Not a single muscle trembled. As she ascended, the Marines stared, unable to look away. Their snickers, their whispered jokes gone. Only awe and unease remained. Halfway up, she paused. Without looking down, she said, "How many of you have ever done this in full combat gear?" Silence. A few Marines shifted uncomfortably. None answered. "Exactly," she said. Then, in one fluid motion, she dropped from the rope, landed silently in the mud, and pivoted to face them. Mud splattered around her sneakers, but she didn't flinch, didn't even shift her footing. Her hoodie clung to her shoulders, dripping rainwater onto the floor, yet she looked untouched, untouchable. Porter's jaw tightened. He had seen men move like this in war zones, men trained to kill without hesitation, but there was something different about Harper Lane, something otherworldly. The squad leader, trying to recover the morning's bravado, spoke up. "Okay, that was impressive, sure, but you're still just a contractor, right? You don't actually." Before he could finish, Harper's voice cut through the hangar, smooth as silk, sharp as a blade. "My contract doesn't define my skill set," she said. "You'll learn that the hard way if you test me." A tremor of unease rippled through the squad. Something about the way she said it, matter of fact, unshakable, made their stomachs tighten. They had never heard a civilian speak like that, and they were beginning to realize why the codename Spectre carried such weight. Porter stepped forward, his voice low, measured. "Time for live drills. Everyone outside. Harper, you're with me." Harper nodded once, barely moving her head. The rain had soaked them both through by the time they reached the firing range. Mud squelched under boots, the wind tore through the trees, and the smell of wet gunpowder hung faintly in the air. The young Marines hesitated as Harper approached the firing line. She didn't handle the rifles with fear, awkwardness, or hesitation. Instead, she checked the weapon with the care of a surgeon and loaded it silently. She didn't look at anyone else, didn't ask permission, didn't acknowledge their shocked faces. She simply stood, weapon ready, scanning the targets like someone already knew every angle, every weak point, every mistake they might make. One Marine, shaking, whispered to his buddy, she's too calm, like she's seen everything." And maybe she had. The whistle blew, signaling the start of the exercise. Marines fired in controlled bursts, adrenaline pumping. Bullets tore into the targets, splinters of wood flying, dust kicking into the wet air. Harper moved into position behind the first line, firing with uncanny precision. Her stance was perfect, every motion deliberate, almost effortless. The targets went down with surgical accuracy. The squad leader's jaw dropped. She's hitting every shot, how?" Harper didn't answer. She never did. Not to questions, not to admiration, not to fear. She simply moved, fluid, deliberate, almost like she was rewriting the rules of the exercise as she went. Then came the final drill, a simulation of a hostile encounter with multiple moving targets. Marines ducked behind cover, firing, advancing, retreating. Harper didn't hesitate. She moved through the mud, taking precise shots, covering angles the trainees hadn't even considered. It was like watching a ghost dance through chaos. By the end, the Marines were panting, soaked, covered in mud and splinters. Their eyes, however, were locked on her. Spectre, Harper Lane. No one spoke for a long moment. Then the squad leader found his voice, barely audible over the storm. Ma'am, that was incredible." Harper didn't flinch, didn't smile, didn't acknowledge the praise. She simply holstered her weapon and looked at them. And then she said something that made all of their hearts stop. "One of you will be removed from this unit before sunset. Make sure it isn't you." The Marines froze, Porter's eyes narrowed. Even he, seasoned and battle-hardened, felt a ripple of unease. That wasn't a warning. That wasn't a challenge. That was a fact delivered with calm finality. The squad leader swallowed hard. What do you mean?" Harper turned slowly, hood dripping, eyes sharp, scanning each Marine like she was measuring their value in some invisible ledger. "I've been briefed. Some of you don't belong here, and I will find out who. Don't test me." The air in the range thickened, heavy with tension and silence. The Marines glanced at one another, unsure who would be next, afraid it might be them. Then, without another word, Harper walked off the line, leaving mud tracks behind her. Porter followed, keeping a close distance. The Marines were left standing in the storm, drenched, shaking, and uncertain if the day had just been a training exercise or a preview of their own mortality. As they trudged back to the barracks, whispering and glancing over their shoulders, the youngest recruit, a boy of 17, muttered, She's not just a civilian. She's a weapon." None of them knew the half of it. Because Harper Lane, Spectre, was about to show them exactly what she could do when the orders were real. And for the first time, these Marines understood something fundamental. No training exercise could prepare them for her. As the rain fell harder, Porter's voice cut through the storm, calm but urgent. "Remember her name. Remember what she did today. You'll be tested again soon, and next time there won't be any simulation." The squad exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of his words sinking into their bones. And somewhere in the shadows of the barracks, Harper smiled. Just a fraction, barely noticeable, but enough to hint that the real test was yet to come. The storm raged on, but inside the hearts of the Marines, a colder, sharper storm had already begun. End of Part 2. Suspense. Who among the Marines will fail the next test? And what will Harper do when the simulation becomes real? The sun barely broke through the gray storm clouds the next morning. Fog clung to the edges of Camp Pendleton like a shroud, and the smell of wet earth mixed with gun oil and sweat. The Marines had barely slept. Whispers of Harper Lane, Spectre, haunted their barracks, drifting through the halls like ghosts. No one dared joke. No one dared underestimate her again. Porter called them to formation near the eastern training grounds. Their boots sank into the mud as they lined up. The squad leader's face was pale, jaw tight. The others avoided eye contact. Each one replayed yesterday's events in their heads, trying to rationalize the impossible. A civilian who moved, shot, and commanded like a seasoned operator, whose mere presence could turn bravado into paralysis. Harper arrived silently, her hoodie-soaked hair plastered to her face. She didn't march, didn't call attention to herself. She simply appeared at Porter's side, and the unit felt the shift immediately. Space in the formation seemed to tighten, air heavier, each Marine conscious of his mistakes, his weaknesses, and, most terrifyingly, his mortality. "Today," Porter began, voice calm but firm, "we move beyond drills, observation, strategy. You will follow instructions precisely. Failure will not be tolerated. Harper, lead." The squad swallowed. Harper nodded once and stepped forward. Unlike the Marines, she moved with purpose, not urgency. Each step deliberate, precise, almost soundless despite the mud. The first obstacle was a wooded area marked by low visibility and uneven terrain, perfect for ambushes, perfect for testing fear. Harper approached it first, pausing at the edge, scanning like a predator. The Marines hesitated behind her, unsure whether to trust her, unsure whether they wanted to follow. "Don't get distracted," she said without looking back. Her voice was low, but it carried clearly through the trees. "Focus. Every step matters." The youngest Marine, hands trembling, whispered to his neighbor, She's like a shadow." The second Marine gave a nervous laugh. "You mean like a ghost?" "She's not a ghost," the first muttered. "She's death walking." Porter's eyes never left the group. He had seen death up close in combat zones, yet something about Harper unsettled him. The Marines were disciplined, trained to react, to follow orders, but their instincts, raw human instincts, shouted at them to stay back, run, or hide. Harper moved into the tree line first, disappearing into the foggy underbrush. The sound of boots in mud followed behind her. The squad struggled to keep pace. Mud pulled at their boots, rain clung to their clothes, and every snapping twig sounded like a gunshot. Halfway through the trees, Harper stopped. She crouched low, scanning a cluster of rocks ahead. The Marines, unsure what to do, stopped too. One tried to speak. What?" "Shut up," she whispered, sharper than any drill instructor's yell. From the rocks, a series of steel targets emerged, a training simulation for ambushes. Harper moved before anyone could react. One by one, she neutralized the targets with lethal precision, her movements smooth, unhurried, devastating. Each shot was perfect. No wasted motion, no hesitation. The Marines' jaws dropped. Their fingers twitched toward their weapons, and some fired, trying to keep up. But none matched her timing. None anticipated the angles like she did. Then came the real test. From the mist, a loud crash, the unmistakable sound of something moving toward them. Harper didn't flinch. She didn't shout. She simply pivoted, scanning. A figure broke through the fog, a Marine from another unit, fully armored, running the attack drill. Harper's voice cut across the trees, calm, commanding, "Cover me." The Marines froze. "What but?" "Now!" Her sudden command jolted them into motion. They scrambled to follow, but Harper moved faster, smaller, sharper. She slid behind cover, adjusted her stance, and fired. The target went down before the others could even react. One Marine stared, horrified. How does she know?" Porter's voice was quiet but deadly. "She doesn't just know, she calculates every possibility, every reaction, every mistake you're about to make." Harper advanced again, fluid, almost invisible. The Marines struggled to keep pace, mud sucking at their boots. Their breath came in ragged gasps. Rain plastered clothes to skin, but Harper's movements were unaffected, smooth, precise, controlled. They reached a clearing where the simulation escalated, multiple moving targets, uneven terrain, and low visibility. Harper didn't hesitate. She advanced first, covering angles the Marines hadn't considered. Each of her moves left the squad in awe and terror. A young corporal tripped over a root, mud coating his uniform, heart pounding. "Ka." Harper turned her head, eyes locking onto him. "Then don't observe, learn, or get out of the way." Her words weren't a threat, they were a statement of fact. The corporal swallowed, trembling, realizing that in this unit, her standards defined survival. They moved on, Harper leading. Every snap of a branch, every whispered instruction, every flash of motion. It was like watching a ghost lead them through a war zone. Then, just as the fog thickened, Harper paused. Her voice was barely audible. "Stop." A Marine instinctively ducked behind a tree. Others froze. Something in the air changed. Movement in the mist, faster, closer, not part of the drill, something alive, something real. Harper didn't flinch. She stepped forward, scanning, calculating. "Not everything is simulated," she said. "Pay attention." Suddenly, a figure emerged from the fog, another squad, running a separate exercise, unaware of the group's presence. Miscommunication could be fatal. Harper moved between them, silently signaling the others to halt. The tension was tangible, every Marine frozen, mud and sweat mingling, hearts racing. The squad leader whispered, She just stopped a possible disaster." "Not stopped," Porter corrected, eyes still on Harper. "Prevented. She saw it before it became real, that's the difference." Harper didn't respond. She simply adjusted her stance, scanning the perimeter. Then quietly she said, "Move forward, keep formation, eyes open. Everything you don't see can kill you." The Marines obeyed, drenched, exhausted, terrified. Their trust was growing reluctantly. And yet no one spoke about why Harper Lane, Spectre, could do what she did. As they exited the woods, the fog clinging to their backs like a warning, Harper paused at the edge of the clearing. The squad caught up, panting, mud-slicked, hearts pounding. Then she did something terrifyingly simple. She looked at each Marine, one by one. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, seemed to pierce into their very thoughts. Finally she spoke. "You will fail if you underestimate me, and if you underestimate yourselves, you will die." The squad fell silent. No one dared speak. The weight of her words settled over them like a storm cloud. Even Porter, seasoned and unshakable, felt it. The presence of a force beyond training, beyond rules, beyond fear. And somewhere deep inside the Marines, a question began to take shape, unspoken but heavy. Who is this woman, and what happens when the training stops being simulated? Harper turned, hood dripping, mud-slick sneakers sinking slightly into the ground. She began walking toward the extraction point, calm as if nothing had happened. The squad followed, each step heavier than the last. They didn't talk. They didn't joke. They didn't laugh. All they could do was watch, learn, and pray they weren't next to fail her unseen test. The fog began to lift, but in the hearts of the Marines, the shadow of Spectre had already settled. And they had no idea what was coming next. The sun had barely risen over Camp Pendleton, its weak light struggling through a sky still bruised with storm clouds. The Marines were assembled, mud-stained and exhausted from the previous day's drills. Tension hung in the air, thick enough to choke on. Every Marine remembered the calm precision of Harper Lane, Spectre, and no one spoke above a whisper. Porter arrived first, his presence alone enough to stop chatter. Today wasn't a drill. Today, the unit would participate in a live reconnaissance operation at a nearby abandoned training facility, simulating an enemy encampment. But unlike the controlled exercises, this would involve real-world variables, terrain they couldn't predict, movement they couldn't anticipate, and obstacles Harper already knew how to exploit. Harper arrived quietly as always. Hoodie soaked, sneakers caked in yesterday's mud, her eyes sharp and assessing. She didn't look at anyone. She simply walked toward the edge of the field, surveying the landscape with the same cold, detached focus she had used during drills. Porter addressed the group. "This is your first field operation. Harper Lane will lead. Follow her instructions exactly. Failure is not an option." The Marines shifted uneasily. Leading them was one thing. Facing the unknown under Harper's guidance was entirely another. The unit moved out, Harper at the front. The first stretch of terrain was treacherous. Broken asphalt, scattered debris, dense foliage. Each step was a potential trip hazard. Each sound, the crunch of gravel, the snap of a twig, made the young recruits flinch. From the tree line, Harper's voice cut through the tension, low but commanding. "Spread. Eyes forward, don't make noise." The squad obeyed instantly. Mud and sweat slicked their clothes, boots sinking into the wet ground. Yet Harper moved effortlessly, weaving through obstacles, scanning the environment as if she could see through walls. A sudden rustle in the brush made one Marine jump. His rifle shook. Harper turned her head slightly, not alarmed, just observing. "Relax," she whispered. "Not every movement is a threat, but every movement is a possibility." They approached the first checkpoint, a ruined structure, its walls partially collapsed. Harper crouched low, signaling them to stop. Her eyes swept the perimeter, noting angles, shadows, and blind spots. Then she moved forward, silent as the wind, disappearing into the ruins. The Marines followed hesitantly, hearts pounding. Each one felt the pull of adrenaline and fear, a combination that left them unnerved and hyper-aware. Inside the structure, Harper stopped again. She pointed at a narrow hallway cluttered with debris. "Single file, move quietly." The squad obeyed. Each Marine placed his foot carefully, aware that a single misstep could alert imaginary enemies, or real ones, if the exercise was representative of reality. Suddenly, from above, a small object hit the floor with a metallic clang. Every Marine froze. Harper tilted her head. Check corners, every shadow. Two Marines advanced, rifles up. Nothing. The sound had come from above, a loose beam settling. Harper moved past them, sliding under a low archway. She emerged on the other side, still composed, still in control. One Marine whispered, shaking, "She's too calm." Porter's voice, quiet but deadly, cut in. "Calm isn't natural here. That's skill. That's experience. Pay attention." They continued, Harper leading through the abandoned facility. Every step she took seemed deliberate, strategic, like she was choreographing a deadly dance with invisible opponents. The Marines struggled to keep pace, constantly tripping over roots, slipping on wet metal, and battling fatigue. Then came the first test of Harper's field leadership, a simulated hostage scenario. A mannequin, dressed to look like a captured civilian, was tied up in the center of a courtyard. Around it, obstacles and traps had been set. Harper stopped at the edge, assessing. "We approach silently," she instructed. "You'll cover flanks, you'll move as one, no mistakes." The Marines glanced at one another nervously. Harper's calm authority left no room for debate. They moved in formation, hearts hammering. Harper advanced first, crouching low, checking angles, calculating every possible line of sight. Suddenly, one Marine whispered a question. "What if it's real?" Harper didn't answer. Not with words. She didn't need to. The silence said everything. She'd already calculated that scenario. As they reached the mannequin, Harper demonstrated a quick, efficient method to neutralize threats and extract the hostage. Her movements were precise, economical, and deadly efficient. Every Marine watched, absorbing the method as if it were life or death, which, in training, it almost was. Then the real lesson came. A mechanical device triggered a trap in the simulation. A smoke grenade rolled toward the squad. Panic flashed in a few eyes. Harper didn't flinch. She grabbed the device with one hand, pivoted, and signaled the squad to move behind cover. They followed, hearts pounding, gasping for breath. Harper's calm contrasted sharply with their panic. Every Marine knew instinctively that she had predicted the exact moment of danger before it arrived. Porter observed quietly from a distance, impressed but wary. Harper's precision was extraordinary, but more than that, the Marines were learning something about herself through her actions. She was fearless, calculated, and utterly lethal, not because she wanted to be, but because she had to be. The squad advanced further into the facility. Every step, every movement was a test. Harper placed them strategically, covering angles, observing weaknesses, and correcting mistakes in real time. The Marines followed, shaken and awed, realizing that their survival depended not just on following orders, but on observing and learning from Spectre. By the time they reached the exit, the squad was exhausted, soaked through, and mentally frayed. They had completed the mission, technically successful, but changed. Something inside them had shifted. Fear was no longer just about mistakes or failure. Fear was about what Harper Lane could do when she chose to act. At the edge of the facility, Harper turned to the squad. Her voice was calm, almost detached, but carried the weight of authority that left no room for disobedience. "Today you survived," she said. "Tomorrow the tests will be harder. Your instincts will fail you. Your confidence will betray you. Only those who observe, learn, and adapt will live." The Marines swallowed hard. None spoke. They had no idea whether she was warning them about future exercises or something much more dangerous. Then Harper did something even more unnerving. She looked at each Marine individually, her gaze sharp, almost surgical. One by one, she seemed to measure their competence, their courage, their limits. Finally, she said, quietly but with undeniable finality, "Some of you will not make it past the next operation. Consider this your first warning." The squad froze. A cold, shivering realization settled over them. Training was no longer just about learning tactics or shooting accurately. It was about surviving Spectre's judgment. Porter remained silent, studying Harper. He had seen elite soldiers, top-tier operatives, and yet she was unlike anyone he had ever encountered. Calm, precise, calculating, but also unpredictable. The Marines might survive the mission today, but they could not predict what Harper would demand of them tomorrow. The squad trudged back to the base, mud and rain clinging to their bodies, hearts heavy. Whispers circulated. "She's not just a leader, she's something else. She doesn't just teach, you feel her testing you in every moment. She knows everything before it happens." Harper walked ahead, unbothered by the murmurs, her hood dripping, sneakers sinking into mud. Every step left an impression not just on the ground but in the Marines' minds. They would not forget her. And as the storm clouds began to break, a new thought began to crystallize. This was not just training. This was preparation for war, and Harper Lane, Spectre, was already several steps ahead of everyone. The sun was barely above the horizon, cutting weakly through clouds that still hung low over the training grounds. The Marines were on edge. Yesterday's field operation had left their muscles sore, minds frayed, and egos battered, but none of that compared to the fear that had settled deep in their bones. Harper Lane, Spectre, was not a drill instructor, not a mentor, not even entirely human in the way they understood it. She was a force, and forces demanded respect, or survival would be impossible. Porter addressed them with a level of seriousness the squad had never heard. "Today's exercise is an ambush scenario. You will move through terrain designed to mimic hostile conditions. Harper Lane will lead. Listen, observe, and survive. Mistakes will cost you." The Marines knew he wasn't exaggerating. By now, every man in the squad had seen Harper's skill firsthand. Her precision, calm under pressure, and uncanny ability to anticipate every movement had shattered every preconception they held about what was possible. Harper appeared at the edge of the field, hoodie soaked, boots caked in mud, face expressionless. She scanned the terrain, measuring angles, shadows, distances, all without touching a compass or map. The Marines followed, each step a mixture of awe and terror. The first stretch of the ambush route was dense woods, the ground uneven, littered with fallen branches and hidden pits. Harper led them silently, moving like a shadow over the terrain. The Marines struggled to keep up, slipping in mud, trying to adjust to her speed and precision. Suddenly, a branch snapped from behind them. Every Marine froze. Harper did not. Her head tilted slightly, eyes narrowing. Without speaking, she dropped to the ground, rolling behind a fallen log with the smooth grace of a cat. The Marines scrambled to cover, hearts hammering. Their training had prepared them for simulated ambushes, but nothing prepared them for Harper's level of anticipation. From the trees, two instructors, simulating enemy combatants, advanced silently, unaware of the squad's precise location. Harper fired first, a single shot that hit the first target in the shoulder, immobilizing him. She rolled to the left, taking another position, firing again. Every movement calculated, every shot deliberate, every Marine behind her instinctively mirroring her actions. "Move forward," she whispered, voice calm, almost serene. "Cover angles, don't hesitate." The Marines obeyed, trying to mimic her precision. Most stumbled. Some froze. One fell completely, mud coating his uniform, heart racing. Harper didn't pause. She pivoted, firing at the remaining instructors, then signaled the squad to continue. Porter watched from a distance, impressed but wary. He had trained elite squads, yet Harper's actions seemed beyond human capability. Every Marine she guided moved more efficiently, anticipated threats, and reacted faster than Porter ever thought possible. And yet, even with her leadership, the young recruits struggled. Fear had a way of paralyzing even the strongest. Halfway through the ambush route, Harper stopped. Her gaze swept the area, reading the terrain with surgical precision. This next stretch is critical. Mistakes here will get you killed. The Marines exchanged uneasy glances. The warning was not rhetorical. The simulated enemy positions ahead were complex, well hidden, and unpredictable. Harper stepped forward first, moving silently into the clearing. From the tree line, a simulated gunfire sequence began, targets popping up, flash powder igniting, smoke filling the air. Marines panicked. Shots were fired, orders shouted, feet slipped on wet mud. Harper moved like a phantom, disappearing into smoke, reappearing at the perfect angle, neutralizing threats with calm efficiency. One Marine, shaking, whispered, She's like a ghost." "She's not a ghost," another muttered. "She's something worse, a weapon." Porter's voice cut through the chaos. "Stay with her. Observe, don't die." Harper continued, leading the squad through the ambush. Every step, every decision was precise. Every Marine's fear and uncertainty became part of her calculations. She corrected mistakes instantly, repositioned soldiers in real time, and used their fear to reinforce discipline. Then came the final test, a simulated hostage extraction. A mannequin representing a high-value target was guarded by multiple enemy instructors positioned across uneven terrain. The Marines froze, unsure how to approach. Harper didn't hesitate. She signaled them to split into two teams, covering flanks, moving in perfect coordination. Harper advanced first, neutralizing threats silently, signaling the Marines to follow. They moved as she directed, hearts pounding, adrenaline surging. The extraction point was across a narrow bridge over a muddy ravine. Any hesitation could be fatal. Suddenly, one Marine slipped. Mud pulled him down, rifle clattering. Harper's eyes snapped to him. In a fluid motion, she grabbed his arm, pulling him to cover. No words, no scolding, only efficiency. Porter, observing from above, felt a chill. The precision, the foresight, the control. Harper was molding these Marines in ways he had never seen. By the time they reached the extraction point, every Marine was physically exhausted, mentally frayed but alive. Harper looked at the squad, scanning each Marine individually. Her gaze was cold, calculating, measuring competence, fear, courage, and potential. Finally, she spoke. "Some of you will not survive the next operation. This is not a threat, it is a fact." The squad remained silent. Fear hung over them like a storm cloud. Harper's words were not empty. They carried weight, judgment, and inevitability. Porter approached Harper quietly. "You're testing them more than just tactics. You're testing their will." Harper nodded slightly. Discipline is nothing without instinct. Instinct is nothing without fear. The next test will reveal who has both. The Marines trudged back to base, soaked and exhausted, knowing that Harper had already marked those who were weakest, slowest, or too afraid to act. Inside the barracks, whispers circulated. "She doesn't just lead, she judges. She's not just a soldier, she's a predator. She knows what we're capable of and what we're not." Harper didn't respond. She didn't need to. The fear, awe, and respect she commanded spoke louder than words. That night, as rain began to fall again, the Marines couldn't sleep. Some stared at the ceiling, imagining the next operation. Others quietly prayed that they had what it took to survive under her guidance. Porter sat alone, watching Harper review maps, quietly planning, calculating, and preparing. He understood the truth. These Marines were no longer just learning to fight. They were being conditioned to survive something far beyond ordinary war. Harper Lane, Spectre, was already several steps ahead of everyone. Dawn broke over the base with an eerie stillness. Fog hovered low, curling around buildings and vehicles, and the air smelled of wet earth and anticipation. The Marines had barely slept. Yesterday's ambush drill had left them exhausted, yet nothing compared to the sense of dread now gnawing at their gut. Today, Harper Lane, Spectre, would lead them into a live exercise that simulated real combat under conditions they couldn't control. Porter gathered the squad, his face grim. This is the culmination of everything you've learned. Today, the simulation is as close to real as it gets. Harper will lead. Follow her instructions precisely. Survival depends on discipline, observation, and courage. Mistakes will be fatal. Harper appeared silently at the edge of the staging area, hood low over her face, hood dripping rainwater onto her caked boots. She didn't speak. She didn't gesture. She simply surveyed the terrain, a sprawling abandoned training complex littered with mock barricades, camouflaged positions, and hidden threats. The squad instinctively tightened formation, following her as if their very survival depended on it, which, in reality, it did. The first stretch of the operation was a narrow corridor of debris and twisted metal. Harper moved first, silent, calculating every step. The Marines followed, struggling to match her precision. A snapped branch behind them made several flinch. Harper paused, looked over her shoulder, and with a single word froze the squad. "Observe." They obeyed, their hearts thudding, their breaths shallow. Harper's eyes scanned the trees, the shadows, the uneven ground. Her calculation was instantaneous, but to the Marines it seemed preternatural. A hostile emerged suddenly from the mist, a soldier from another unit, armed with blanks and running a surprise engagement scenario. Most Marines reacted instinctively, panic in their eyes, firing wildly. Harper didn't flinch. She slid into cover, raised her rifle, and neutralized the target with a single, precise shot. The figure dropped silently before it could raise its weapon. The squad froze, watching. Their guns shook in hands slick with sweat and mud. "Move," Harper whispered. "One step at a time, eyes open. Check every corner, assume danger is everywhere." They advanced. Every movement Harper made was deliberate. Every shot she fired, every gesture she gave, was a lesson etched in terror and awe. She adjusted their positions silently, signaling flanks, guiding them through the chaos without speaking more than a handful of words. Porter observed quietly from a distance, impressed but unsettled. He had trained with elite soldiers, watched live operations in the field, and yet Harper's control over the squad and the battlefield was unprecedented. Every Marine she led moved more efficiently, anticipated threats better, and reacted faster than Porter had thought possible for a unit this inexperienced. Halfway through the operation, Harper stopped. The clearing ahead contained multiple simulated hostiles, hidden behind debris and low barricades. The Marines froze, hearts hammering. The squad leader whispered, We can't cover all of them." Harper's voice cut through, calm, measured, lethal. "Then you do what you can. Watch my movements. Learn. Adapt." Without hesitation, she sprinted forward, disappearing behind a barricade, firing with controlled precision. Her rifle moved smoothly from target to target, neutralizing threats almost effortlessly. The Marines followed her lead, inspired, terrified, and scrambling to replicate her movements. Suddenly, one Marine stumbled, mud pulling him down. A flash of panic crossed his face. Harper moved faster than thought possible, grabbing his arm, pulling him to cover without breaking stride or losing focus on the targets. Porter's eyes narrowed. Harper's actions weren't just skill, they were teaching survival in motion. Every move calculated, every shot deliberate, every command unspoken but understood. They advanced deeper into the complex. Fog thickened, and visibility dropped to mere feet. Harper adjusted on the fly, signaling movements with subtle gestures, guiding the Marines through a maze of traps, barricades, and simulated hostiles. Each step, each turn, each breath became a test of instinct, discipline, and courage. Then came the final challenge, a high-value target simulation, guarded by multiple instructors moving unpredictably. Harper crouched low, scanning angles. She whispered to the squad, "This is it. Observe, cover, move, no hesitation." The Marines obeyed, but fear gnawed at them. They had followed her through drills and ambushes, but this was live, unpredictable, and fast. Every instinct screamed caution, but Harper's calm authority overrode it. Harper advanced first. Every shot, every movement, every gesture was calculated. The squad mirrored her actions, some faltering, some perfect, but all alive. They reached the target, a mannequin strapped to a chair, and Harper signaled extraction. Suddenly, a simulated threat emerged from the shadows. Most Marines panicked, firing blindly. Harper pivoted, neutralizing the threat in a single, fluid movement, then signaled the squad to move to extraction. By the time they reached safety, the squad was physically exhausted and mentally frayed, but alive. Every Marine's uniform was soaked, boots caked in mud, hands trembling, hearts racing. Harper looked at each Marine individually, scanning them as if reading their very souls. Then she spoke, voice calm, cold, yet commanding. "Some of you will not make it past the next operation. This is not a warning, it is a fact." The Marines swallowed hard. Fear settled deep in their bones. Harper's judgment was absolute, and they all knew it. Porter approached her quietly. "You're pushing them beyond skill. You're testing their will." Harper nodded slightly. "Discipline without instinct is useless. Instinct without courage is dead. Tomorrow the real test begins. Only those prepared will survive." The Marines trudged back to base, mud and rain clinging to their bodies, hearts heavy. They whispered among themselves, terrified and in awe. "She's not just a leader, she's a force of nature. She doesn't just command, she judges. She knows our weaknesses before we do." Harper walked ahead silently, leaving an impression not just in the mud, but in the minds of every Marine who followed. They would not forget her, nor the lesson she imparted. That night in the barracks, no one slept. Every Marine lay awake, haunted by the memory of Harper's calm authority, precision, and near unknowable skill. Fear had settled into their bones, and admiration mingled with terror. Porter watched Harper quietly, reviewing maps and planning silently. He understood the truth. These Marines were no longer just learning tactics. They were being conditioned to survive something far beyond ordinary war. Harper Lane, Spectre, was already several steps ahead of everyone, shaping them into something stronger, faster, and sharper. Outside, rain began again, washing the training grounds in a cold, gray haze. Inside, the Marines knew the next operation would test everything they had learned, and perhaps reveal whether they could endure Harper's judgment. The early morning fog had barely lifted when the squad was called to assemble outside the command center. Mud-caked boots, soaked uniforms, and tired eyes were everywhere. The Marines moved like shadows of themselves, weighed down by exhaustion, adrenaline, and the memory of Harper Lane, Spectre's previous exercises. Porter stood at attention, his face grim. "Today is not a drill, it is a real-world operation. Our objective, secure a hostile compound used for weapons training and gather intelligence. Harper Lane will lead. Listen, observe, and survive." The squad exchanged uneasy glances. Harper's presence alone made the mission feel more like a confrontation with an invisible force than a standard operation. Whispers followed her wherever she walked. One young recruit muttered under his breath, "I still don't understand. Why is she called Spectre?" No one answered. Everyone felt the weight of the name, heavy, unspoken, dangerous. Harper appeared silently at the edge of the staging area. Hoodie low, boots slick with mud, eyes scanning the horizon. She didn't speak. She didn't gesture. She simply moved, and the Marines instinctively fell into formation behind her, every step a lesson in discipline, observation, and survival. The approach to the compound was treacherous. Twisted terrain, hidden ditches, and debris littered the path. Harper led, scanning the environment with surgical precision. Every movement was calculated, every decision deliberate. The Marines struggled to match her pace, slipping in mud, trying to keep up with her uncanny awareness. Suddenly, Harper froze. From the tree line, the faintest movement, barely perceptible, caught her attention. She dropped to a crouch, signaling the squad silently to follow suit. A group of armed combatants emerged from cover, unaware of the approaching Marines. The squad panicked, fumbling with rifles, hearts hammering. Harper didn't flinch. She moved forward silently, fluidly, neutralizing the lead target with a single precise shot. The rest scattered. "Move forward, cover all angles. Watch my movements," she whispered, calm but lethal. The squad obeyed, hearts racing, breath ragged. Harper advanced like a shadow, disappearing into cover, reappearing at the perfect angle, neutralizing threats with efficiency and precision. Porter observed from a distance, impressed and uneasy. He had trained elite soldiers, seen combat firsthand, and yet Harper's control over the battlefield was unlike anything he had ever witnessed. Every Marine she led moved faster, anticipated threats, and reacted with a synchronicity that seemed almost impossible. They reached the perimeter of the compound and Harper stopped. Her gaze swept the area, noting enemy positions, blind spots, and possible escape routes. "This is it," she whispered to the squad. "Observe, cover, and act. Do not hesitate." The Marines moved forward, attempting to replicate Harper's precision, but fear made their movements hesitant. One tripped over debris, mud coating his uniform, heart racing. Harper pivoted, pulling him behind cover without breaking stride. Inside the compound, the squad encountered a series of unexpected traps and ambush points. Harper navigated them with calm efficiency, signaling the squad to adjust positioning, anticipate threats, and neutralize dangers. Each move she made was a lesson in survival and lethal efficiency. Finally, they reached the central structure. Harper crouched at the entrance, scanning the interior. "High-value target inside. Proceed with caution," she whispered. The Marines froze. Fear was palpable. Harper didn't hesitate. She signaled them to enter in formation. One by one, they moved inside, rifles ready. Harper led, every step calculated, every movement deliberate. Inside, they found the target, a high-ranking enemy operative, armed and dangerous. The squad panicked, unsure how to proceed. Harper moved forward, neutralizing the threat with a swift, precise action. The Marines followed, awestruck and terrified. Porter approached her quietly afterward. "You've done it again, incredible, but why Spectre? Why the Codename?" Harper turned, eyes locking onto his. Her voice was calm, but carried the weight of experience and a reputation that sent chills down his spine. "I am called Spectre because I am the shadow no one sees coming. On the battlefield, I am present before my enemies know they are in danger. I am the silent force that strikes, the observer who survives. And in the end, my presence alone changes everything." The Marines, listening, paled. The codename wasn't just a label, it was a declaration of lethal intent. Every whisper about her earlier, every rumor, every story was real. They had underestimated her. "Why reveal it now?" Porter asked, still cautious. "Because you need to understand," Harper said. "The next operation will not be simulated. There will be no second chances. Fear will test you. Skill alone will not save you. And those who hesitate will die. Remember this name, remember it well." The squad stared, shaken to the core. Spectre, Harper Lane, was more than a soldier, more than a leader. She was an embodiment of calculated terror, a figure who moved with lethal precision, whose codename alone could strip bravado from the bravest men. Outside, the fog rolled back over the compound. Rain began to drizzle again. The Marines looked at each other, silent, knowing they were not just training. They were preparing to operate under the judgment of someone who was already steps ahead of every threat, every scenario, and every possible outcome. The youngest recruit whispered, voice trembling, She's unstoppable." "She's not just unstoppable," another replied. "She's a force that sees everything, anticipates everything, and punishes failure." Harper turned and walked away, hood low, boots leaving muddy prints behind. Porter followed silently. The Marines remained silent, shaken, and forever changed. They had survived, but their understanding of war, of leadership, and of Harper Lane, Spectre, had shifted irrevocably. And somewhere deep inside the squad, a chilling question took root. If the codename alone can make seasoned soldiers pale, what happens when Spectre decides it's time to strike? The morning air was heavy with mist, thick and damp, clinging to the soldiers like a warning. Camp Pendleton's training grounds were eerily quiet, broken only by the soft murmur of water running through muddy ditches and the distant cries of seagulls. The squad assembled, uniforms still streaked with mud, faces pale from exhaustion, adrenaline, and a creeping dread. Today was no longer a simulation. Today, the Marines would face a test designed to push them beyond their limits, and Harper Lane, codenamed Spectre, would lead them through it. Porter addressed the squad first, his voice steady but serious. "This is the final operation. Harper will guide you. The terrain is unpredictable. Threats will appear without warning. You must trust her completely, or you will fail." The Marines exchanged uneasy glances. Words like trust felt inadequate, almost absurd, considering the terrifying precision of Harper's previous operations. They knew she could anticipate every threat, neutralize every obstacle, and punish hesitation instantly. The codename Spectre wasn't just a label, it was a force of nature. Harper appeared silently at the edge of the staging area, hood low, wet strands of hair plastered to her face. She scanned the terrain with an intensity that sent a shiver down every Marine's spine. Then, without a word, she started moving, and the squad instinctively followed. The first stretch was a wooded ravine, thick with fog and littered with fallen branches. Harper moved like a shadow, her boots barely making a sound. The Marines stumbled, cursing under their breath, struggling to match her fluid, precise movements. From the tree line, the faintest noise, a twig snapping underfoot, made every Marine freeze. Harper crouched low, signaling them silently to follow. Her eyes scanned the area, calculating angles, distances, and trajectories with superhuman speed. Suddenly, targets emerged from the fog, instructors simulating enemy combatants, armed and unpredictable. Panic erupted. Shots were fired and Marines screamed, but Harper moved with terrifying precision. One fluid motion, one controlled shot after another, and the first wave of threats was neutralized before it even had a chance to react. "Move forward, eyes on me," she whispered, voice calm, sharp, commanding. The Marines obeyed, following her as if their survival depended on it, which it did. Every step Harper took was a lesson in anticipation, discipline, and ruthless efficiency. She adjusted their positioning, corrected their mistakes silently, and guided them through a maze of fog, debris, and simulated hostiles without breaking her composure. Then came the true test, a fortified structure at the center of the training field, heavily guarded with obstacles, traps, and enemy operators who moved unpredictably. The squad froze at the edge, adrenaline spiking, minds racing. Harper didn't hesitate. She moved forward, signaling the Marines to cover flanks, advance slowly, and watch her lead. Inside the structure, chaos erupted. Targets appeared suddenly from shadows, shots rang out, and smoke filled the room. The squad panicked, some firing wildly, others frozen in fear. Harper didn't flinch. She neutralized threats with breathtaking speed and fluidity, pivoting and moving like a predator stalking its prey. Every action was precise, every calculation perfect. One Marine tripped, mud covering his uniform. Harper moved instantly, pulling him behind cover, positioning him strategically, and signaling the rest of the squad to adjust. She didn't scold, didn't speak unnecessarily. Her calm authority spoke louder than words. Porter observed silently from the perimeter, awestruck. He had seen elite operators, trained elite units, but Harper's control, speed, and anticipation were beyond anything he had encountered. Every Marine she led moved more efficiently, reacted faster, and survived longer than Porter had ever thought possible. Then Harper paused. Her gaze swept across the room. Every corner, every shadow, every obstacle was accounted for in her mind. She whispered one word, low and deadly. "Advance." The Marines obeyed, hearts racing. They moved with her, eyes wide, sweat dripping, muscles screaming. Harper led them through the chaos, neutralizing threats, covering angles, and guiding the squad with unparalleled precision. Finally, they reached the final chamber, a simulated high-value target heavily guarded. The Marines froze. Fear gripped them. Harper didn't hesitate. She moved forward, neutralizing threats with lethal efficiency. The squad followed, awed and terrified. Porter approached her quietly afterward. "You've done it again, beyond anything I've ever seen. Why do they call you Spectre?" Harper's gaze met his. Her voice was calm, chillingly composed. "I am Spectre because I am always present before danger even knows it exists. I am the shadow that strikes, the observer who survives, the force that changes everything simply by being there. On the battlefield, hesitation is death, fear is survival, and those who fail to adapt do not survive." The Marines listened, pale, realizing the codename wasn't just a title, it was a warning. Every rumor, every story about Harper Lane was real. Every calculation she made, every move she executed, had prepared them for this very moment. Outside, the fog began to lift. Rain pattered against the mud, washing away traces of their passage. The Marines stood silently, aware that they had survived, not because of skill alone, but because Harper had led them with precision, foresight, and a force that defied ordinary understanding. One young recruit whispered, voice trembling, She's unstoppable." "She's not just unstoppable," another replied, voice low. "She's the storm itself. She sees everything, anticipates everything, and punishes failure instantly." Harper turned and walked away, hood low, leaving muddy footprints behind. Porter followed silently, aware that the Marines had been transformed. Fear, respect, awe, they were forever changed. They would not underestimate her again. And as they walked back to base, a chilling thought settled over the squad. Spectre doesn't just lead, she defines the battlefield, and when she decides to strike, nothing survives in her path. The fog thickened behind them, shadows stretching long, carrying whispers of her legend. Harper Lane, Spectre, had shown them what true mastery looked like. The Marines had survived, but they knew one truth above all. The next time the stakes would be higher, and there would be no second chances.